good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today, some very good news. Submarines are being pulled from the game for the run of Update 11.0 up until the beginning of Update 11.2. So that's 2 whole patch cycles, 10 whole weeks with no subs in the game. Why? Because the devs are having one hell of a time trying to balance them. This is something that we've talked about before with the introduction of a class with such drastically different mechanics as submarines into the game. And, well, essentially the devblog that they put out today is a summarization and a much more detailed look at what I've been saying and others have been saying for some time about submarines' impact on the game. That it's just gone through the floor, dramatically so, in terms of dealing damage and such. So we're going to go through the devblog, and this is a very good, very in-depth devblog. They show us the coveted spreadsheet in this devblog. Now, I'm not going to sit here and break down every single point into like some 2-hour video. We're going to go over the big notes, the big changes, and the big takeaways from the information that they give us. If you want to check this devblog out, and I strongly encourage you to do so, link to it will be in the description down below. Again, they break everything down. They explain how this change affected this, and how this change affected this, and what they might be trying to do in the future. I do highly encourage you guys to check this stuff out. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get going. Any relevant graphs will be shown up on screen. We'll be taking a look at a few of these as we go through this. So let's get into it, shall we? DevBlog. Submarines, results of testing and random battles and further plans. We would like to share more information about submarine testing, to comment on their current status and results of changes in more detail, and to share some future plans with you. Brief summary. The changes made in 10.10 and 10.11, splitting subs torpedoes into 2 types and changing the torpedo's guidance, have improved gameplay and the interaction of the new class with surface ships. Even taking into account the lifetime of submarines, which is comparable to destroyers and cruisers, other indicators of subs' combat effectiveness are significantly inferior to other classes. Since 10.10, the average damage caused by submarines has decreased by about 25%. We will try to find other ways to increase the influence of submarines in combat, but we will not completely rule out the possibility of improving their torpedoes if other options will be ineffective. While in Update 10.9, submarines were close to destroyers in terms of spotting damage, now the new class is roughly comparable to cruisers in this regard. Submarines at Tier 10 currently have roughly the same popularity as aircraft carriers, but slightly less so at Tier 6 and Tier 8. We do not expect a significant change in popularity at Tier 10, but we can expect a small increase at lower tiers. Based on the results of the 11.0 public test, we realize that the planned changes do not lead to the desired result. Submarines remain insufficiently effective compared to other classes. We have decided to temporarily stop testing submarines on the main server in order to prepare additional changes. From version 11.0 until the beginning of 11.2, submarines will not be available on the main server. In 11.2, we plan to resume submarine testing with additional improvements to their mechanics. General testing progress. We understand that testing a new class on the main server may be inconvenient, and we would like to thank you for playing submarines, playing against them, and for your feedback. Unfortunately, only real battles on the main server provide so much data and opinions to bring the mechanics of submarines and their counters to the point where they can be introduced into the game on a regular basis. We are happy to see from your feedback and stats that the changes made in 10.10 and 11.0 have improved gameplay and interaction between the new class and surface ships. With both the changes already made and the upcoming changes to submarines and their associated mechanics, we want to achieve a gameplay that is balanced and interesting for both sides, in which the key objective of the new class is to attack the enemy from unexpected positions at unusual timing. We believe that it is most important to make the interaction between submarines and surface ships healthy, but at the same time that submarines are not too weak. Okay. So essentially what they're saying here is that submarines have become beyond ineffective, which is very true. Right now, if you go play submarines, it's very difficult to do very well in them. Now, beforehand, I'm not saying that they need to go back to that case. where they were just the hand of God, and if you weren't in a battleship, you were essentially dead. Battleships have had their 2.1 kilometer negation of homing since then. And they have been, and up until this day, the easiest class to dodge torpedoes in. If you're wearing a cruiser or destroyer, I'm sure most of us can remember that, how the torpedoes were like, again, ace combat missiles that were taking these insane turns to hit you, and unless you were literally running at full tilt, at full rudder, at the right time, you were going to eat these submarines' torpedoes. Destroyers were even worse. But now they changed the torpedoes to where it's much less much less aggressive in terms of homing, and much easier for cruisers and destroyers to dodge these torpedoes now. And they also nerf the damage too. And that has caused their average damage to just absolutely plummet. And they're very... how do I put this? They're very boring to play now, because you spend so long trying to get, your torpedoes to hit one target. And when they hit that one target, you're doing maybe on a good day, when the target derps into the torpedoes, you're doing maybe 20,000 damage. But it takes you 5 minutes to do that, which is, shoot, at best case, that's about a quarter of the match. In worst case, with the way some of the matches are going now, that's anywhere from half to all the match that you're spending trying to do 20k to one ship, and then the match ends. Which, I mean, it's frustrating when you're playing a tier 10 battleship and you get like 80,000 damage and the match ends in like 8 minutes. Imagine having to spend all the match just to do 20k, and you're doing just about everything that you can do to make that happen. So it's frustrating, really annoying to play submarines right now, and really boring. So down below they provide us with before and after charts of the average damage of submarines by tier in update 10.9 to 10.11. So the first set you're going to see here is tier 6. This is the first one, should be before 10.9. Well, no, 10.9, and then the next set should be 10.11. And submarines are in green, turquoise are DDs, cruisers are red, battleships are blue, and aircraft carriers are orange. And they go by tier 6 and then to tier 8. And again, actually, I'll just put subtitles below them so you'll be able to see what's what. I'll just let them roll right here as we go through it. And you can see the average damage of submarine, which should be the first column. Yes, it is. It's dropped dramatically, like by about 10-ish K per tier, which that's a big drop in average damage. So yeah, I mean, when you nerf the torpedoes and you nerf the homing, which that's their only method of doing damage, that's going to happen. And it was very obvious that that's what was going on. Now, you could sit here and argue that they should be like this because X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, whatever. But you have to understand that from a gameplay mechanic, you want the classes that you're making in your game to be fun and competitive and be able to keep up with the other classes. I'm just talking from a gameplay perspective. If they take them out in 11.0 and they never added them back in, I'll applaud that decision. Alright, so they're going to talk about torpedoes and the sonar pings. They say the key change of submarines since they were introduced to the main server is a change to torpedoes in 10.10. Displaying acoustic guidance and damage increase from acoustic pings between the two torpedo types. The improvement made by your feedback made it possible to make the interaction between subs and other classes healthier. At the same time, submarines were not overpowered before the change, and with 10.10, the damage caused by submarines was reduced by about 25% or more. And then they go on to provide us with a couple more graphs that, what are these? The graphs below show a comparison of average submarine damage by tier in updates 10.9 and 10.11. The first two lines are the damage of an American submarine of the corresponding tier. Second two, the damage of a German submarine. Oh, these are actually labeled, so I'll go ahead and throw these up on screen as we go through that. Okay, so yeah, essentially again, the torpedo damage is vastly down. They have this broken up by, how much of this is done by one ping, how much of this is double ping, torpedoes, flooding, damage. The little blue sliver is apparently secondary damage, and yeah, at the tier 10 for the Germans there are none, and the Americans too, because they don't have secondary guns. At least they don't have secondary guns that work on the two tier 10 submarines. All right. So they say torpedoes are the only submarine weapon, if you take secondaries and ramming possibility into account, that are relatively unreliable in dealing damage. Right now, we don't want to significantly increase torpedo parameters such as damage, reload time, and speed, as this significantly affects the perception of combat by surface ships. However, we strive to ensure that submarines are not significantly weaker than other classes. Therefore, we will try to find other ways to increase submarines' influence in combat, but we will not completely rule out the possibility of improving their torpedoes if other options are unacceptable. One such way would be to improve submarine survivability. Increasing survivability along with increasing depth charges damage would make submarines somewhat more resistant to artillery fire, but still extremely vulnerable to depth charges. The increase in the duration of double ping sector time planned for 11.0 will redistribute the damage that submarines do with different pings effects. Currently, a significant amount of damage is done without sonar pings at all, by shotgunning the torpedoes. Although we believe that keeping the double ping effect on the target is what the submarine commander should strive for, as this interaction has both the skill requirement for the submarine player and the way to counter it from the surface ship. Okay, so yeah, no duh, after the big torpedo changes, the damage has gone down. It would make sense, and this is something that I was surprised when they introduced the super torpedoes, if you want to call them that. If you guys remember back to when they doubled the damage and upped the speed to like 80 and 90 knots, I was surprised they just didn't start tweaking the damage up first. The simple solution now would be to simply increase the torpedo damage. Obviously, not back to what it was before. Before update 10.9 or 10.10, when the torpedo changes were made, submarines, of course, were nuking ships left, right, and center. Now they've bonked them down, and now they're at the low end. To me, it would be simple to just slightly increase torpedo damage to the happy midsection, to where the average damage isn't, far below the other classes of the same tier, and at the same time to where you aren't nuking ships out of existence with 1 or 2 torpedoes, and not right now where you spend the entire match doing 20k. And really, guys, I really encourage you. I do believe the submarine is still available to rent until the end of this update. I really encourage you to go try these out for yourselves. There's a lot of players that on the forums and YouTube comments, they're complaining about submarines, but someone asks me, have you actually played them? And they often respond, no, I haven't. It really puts it into perspective. And again, I'm not trying to say that submarines should be in the game. I'm just saying you should go try it for yourself to see what it's like trying to play them. Plus, when you play the class, you understand how to best counter it. I cannot stress that enough, not only with submarines, but other surface ships too. If you're having problems with being killed by DDs or cruisers or battleships or whatever, go play them so you can see how they play, how they operate, and how you can best counter them. Alright? That's what I suggest you guys do, so you can understand what's going on here. Alright, another graph. The graph shows distribution of battles by average amount of damage dealt by tier 10 ships of Pacific class. Numbers at the bottom show damage and value in thousands. And oh my god, look how wonky submarines are. Talk about not corresponding to the curve. So the blue line is submarines, green are destroyers, red are cruisers, turquoise is battleships, and orange are aircraft carriers. So yeah, submarines are all out of whack here in terms of damage being dealt via, what is this? Distribution of battles by average, so it's percentage of battles at the top and the average damage at the bottom. So wow, if you look at that, 32% of submarine battles, 0 damage. Dang, that's a little wonky there. So yeah, just take your bell curve and screw it, apparently is what the submarines are saying. Alright, detectable interaction with destroyers, depth charges, and airstrikes. We didn't plan for submarines to take away the title of top scout from destroyers and aircraft carriers, and by changing the scouting mechanics in 10.10, we significantly reduced the damage done to targets detected by submarines. Whereas in Tier 9, they were close to destroyers in this respect, the new class is now roughly comparable to cruisers in terms of spotting damage. I would think that would be ideal. I mean, submarines, they didn't really communicate, especially during World War II, didn't really communicate with the fleet much at all. So it makes sense that they should be the class going out there spotting. They should be, in my mind, kind of like assassins. They either contest the caps or fight over the key cap areas, or they get around, sneak around behind, and their main goal is to sink one or two ships that are unsuspected and not really paying attention, which they're kind of okay for that now, but the issue is they don't really have time to get around behind the enemy lines and go after, maybe that one or two battleship or cruisers that are either like island hugging and HE spamming, or the one or two battleships that are sniping out in the back. They simply don't have time for that now, either because the match ends too soon or they aren't quick enough to get there and do that. Because again, when you do get there, with the way the torpedoes are now, good luck trying to sink a whole battleship with the current submarines, unless they're just completely brain dead and sitting completely still. Alright, so speaking of depth charges and killing submarines, one frequently mentioned topic is the difficulty of attacking a submarine with destroyers. Yes, indeed, this class and the depth charges are not the best way to destroy an enemy submarine right now. We want it to be a complementary rather than a key target in combat for the destroyers, and their actions to be focused on fighting for key areas. In earlier stages of testing, one of the most popular concerns for both us and players was the excessive increase in the load on the destroyers. The introduction of depth charges to airstrikes allowed us to redistribute this workload among the different classes. Although depth charges to airstrikes is currently risk-free, the settings of the individual bombs did not allow for reliable damage to submarines. The changes scheduled for the recent update 11.0 are aimed at changing the effectiveness of this airstrike. I won't talk about this too much. We did a whole video on this talking about how they're changing the depth charge airstrike. Basically, they're changing to where it's easier for in 1v1 if you lead the submarine correctly for you to do damage to the submarine. I believe they're changing the drop pattern, because before, when you would lead the airstrike correctly, the depth charges would fall alongside the submarine in two lines, which means the submarine, all they would have to do is dive and wouldn't even have to maneuver, and they'd be okay. But I believe they're changing it now to where it's less depth charges being dropped, but they do more damage, and they should drop directly on the submarine, which, of course, submarine either has to maneuver a lot more, and they're probably still going to take damage anyway if the depth charges are dropping right on top of the submarine. But again, well, I was going to say we'll see how that works in 11.0, but we're going to have to wait until 11.2 now to see how that works. Alright, last thing we're going to take a look at is the popularity of submarines. So they say submarines at Tier 10 currently have roughly the same popularity as aircraft carriers, but slightly less so at Tiers 6 and 8. The new class already had an interested audience that plays submarines every period of availability. We don't expect a significant change in popularity at Tier 10, but we can expect a small increase at lower tiers. So these graphs, orange are battleships, green cruisers, red destroyers, blue aircraft carriers, and violet submarines. So it's showing how popular the classes are, and wow, tiers 6 and 8, nobody plays subs. And you can see this in game. Like, if you play at tier 6 and tier 8, you don't see submarines. You might see one every now and then. Like, every 10 matches, if that. But tier 10, they're a bit more popular, they're a bit more regular, and I play a lot of tier 10, of course, and there might be one every other game. Again, kind of like CVs, just like they said. So, overall, it looks like they're taking a step back to really hammer out some changes, and I'm glad they're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, it gives us all a break from submarines, which is very nice. Even though submarines aren't very effective right now, they are beyond annoying in many cases, and it seems to be that extreme right now. Either they do absolutely nothing, or they annoy the hell out of me. That's what it is, because there's some submarine commanders, when they get on you, they're going to stay on you, they're going to ping you the entire match, and you got to deal with that by yourself most of the time. But other than that, I mean, I really haven't been bothered by submarines, like, at all since the changes. And they really do seem to be extremely ineffective right now, and extremely unpopular. So, beyond that submarines are being removed, and we want to deal with them for some time. They're taking a step back. They're not doing what they did with the CV test, where they just shoved the CV changes through and said, "Up, here you go. We'll fix it as we go." They're taking a step back, trying some new things, and they're not taking the simple route. Like I said, they could simply just up torpedo damage. They are trying to find another way to make submarines more viable rather than just cranking their torpedo damage up. But they're not doing that. They're taking a step back and trying something else, which I must applaud. So again, here at the end, I'll reiterate this again because people think I want submarines in game. I don't. I don't want the submarines in the game. But if they're going to put them in, I would want for them to be as balanced as possible before they introduced a whole new class into the game. And again, they're taking their time. We're going to get a 10-week break from them starting in 11.0, and they're going to take them back to their mad scientist chambers in St. Petersburg and see what happens with them. So guys, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. I'm sure this will be a wonderful comment section as always with submarines. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Thursday. Oh, I'm live streaming tonight, by the way. I was going to live stream on Friday, but Friday's New Year's Eve. Yeah, so again, we'll be having a live stream tonight on the channel from 5 p.m. U.S. Central Time to 8 p.m. U.S. Central Time, so make sure you guys come out for that. Hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.